Hello and welcome back. Once again, my name is Avery, and today I'll be going over assignment number 4 for SQL. And we're going to start with the Shopify system where I have created a stored procedure to update the customer data table after a line item has been added. So starting off here, we're altering this procedure. I called it update customer table after sale V1. And we begin by declaring an internal variable, sales ID. It's an integer. We're basically selecting the maximum sales ID from the sales details table. And since the sales ID is a primary key that auto numbers, basically that just means we're grabbing the most recent sales ID. We're declaring another local variable, customer ID, again, an integer. And basically we're just grabbing customer ID from the sales details table that matches where the sales ID meets this sales ID up here. So basically we're saying grab the customer ID that matches the one on the most recent sales ID. And it's distinct because there should only be one customer ID per sale. And then we're going to select all the information from the customer's database, or sorry, the customer's table for that customer ID, which is referencing the local variable, which is the most recent customer ID, because it's pulled from the most recent sale, if that makes sense. And the point of this is just so that we can see the before, and then we'll select after we've added it, so you can see what's changed. And then another local variable, revenue. We're just adding up the line totals from sales details. So if you bought, you know, 3 of item 2 and 1 of item 3, excuse me, all 3 of those would be added up in the sum from the sales details table, obviously where the sales ID matches this one up here in our local variable, the most recent sales ID. Similar thing for invoice date, another local variable. This time it's date time, obviously, it's a date. And we're selecting it from the sales details table where sales ID is equal to our local variable sales ID, so the most recent sale. Again, similar for number SKU, an integer. We are counting the number of product IDs as something called the number of products. So as opposed to counting the prices or anything like that, it's just, oh, you bought 2 of product 1 and 1 of product 3. That means 3 total products. Again, from the sales details table, specifically where this column equals our local variable sales ID, which is the most recent sales ID. And then we are updating the customer's data table. Last purchase is going to be the invoice date. That seems pretty straightforward. Obviously, that's the local variable that we've declared up here. Total revenue, we are adding this revenue local variable up here. Number sales, we can just add 1. You can just assume that each one of these is a new sale. There's no need to calculate that. And the number SKU, similar to the revenue, we are adding this local variable. And we're doing that for the customer column that is equal to the customer column from our local variable. And then again, we're displaying our data right down here. And you should be able to see the difference between these two. And to give an example, first we're going to have to add a sales detail so we can update afterwards. So let's just look here. Let's see. Let me grab my customers and see who does not have a sale. I do not have a sale. Avery Clark does not. That's 1003. And what's an item we can grab? 1008, the bookshelf. I'm going to buy a bookshelf. So, oops, sorry. Here we go. Insert that line item. 1003, 1008, 1 unit. We're going to say this is a new sale. And we'll say it's happening today. So 09/16. Boom. Product ID is valid, customer ID is valid, line item added. Very nice. So if we go over here to our sales details table, we will see, there we are, right down there. Oh, nope, that's actually the previous one. We need to refresh, obviously. And there we go, right down there. There's me buying a bookshelf. But our customers data table does not reflect that. I still have no purchases. But we are going to use our stored procedure. No inputs necessary. And here we go. Here's the results. This is from our first select statement, the data before the update, and the second select statement, the data after the update. As you can see, we've added last purchase, total revenue, number of sales, and we've added one to the number SKU. And here we have the reservations table itself. Obviously, reservation ID being that primary key, and guest ID and room ID are foreign keys. As we can see here, if we go to columns, foreign keys, reservation ID, obviously auto numbering as well, these all being integers. And we have check-in date, checkout date, and some other fields which are numeric and will be calculated after the guest has finished with their stay. And these obviously default to 0 as well. All right. Moving on to the Coog Hotel system. One second. We added a function to save a reservation. So to actually add to this reservations table that we created last time. All right, so we have these inputs, the guest ID, integer, room ID, integer, check-in date, date time, checkout date, date time, and the number of guests. Because these other things, like the room fee, extra service fees, tax, and the subtotals, we would not know at the time of inputting, and they'd be calculated afterwards. So we begin, and we're doing a couple of if statements, a couple of data constraints. So we're saying if it exists anywhere in the guest data table where there's a guest ID equal to the one that we have input up here, then we're going to say the guest ID is valid. If, however, else, it does not exist. So if the guest ID that we input in this parameter, this input up here, is not found in the guest data table, in other words, if you have not created an ID for that guest before they check in, we will say check guest ID, program stopped, and we'll shut down. But if we get past that data constraint, we'll go check to see if the room exists. So it will go check into the room table. If the room ID that we've input, this parameter put in by the user, matches an existing room ID, then we'll say the room ID is valid. Otherwise, if that is not the case, if they put in 2001 and there's no room 2001, we will print check the room ID list and we'll stop running the program. And if we make it past that data constraint, we're going to check to see if the room is booked. So in the rooms data table, if there exists a room ID that matches the one that we have input right here, which is up top, and booked, which is a bit true false, is set to false, then we'll say the room is available. So it's not booked, we check that, the room's available. Otherwise, else, we're going to say the room is already booked, and we're going to stop running the program. If the room is already booked, else means that it must be true because it's only a bit. There's only two options, 0 or 1, true or false. So if it's not false, then it must be true, and that means the room is already booked. We're a little note here, because this would only work for same-day bookings, the way I have it laid out here, because it only says if something is currently booked or not. In other words, If you're booking something online, you would say, well, I'm going to stay May 19th through the 20th. You're probably months in advance. So it would need to sort of check the dates. So that is a flaw that I should try fixing here. Um, yeah. And then another thing is that it doesn't update. So if I say if the room is available, like if this is set to false, um, I don't set it to true. I I think it would be fairly easy to add to the stored procedure to just say, oh, update it to say update the booked bit to say that it's true. But I don't know how to then automatically unbook it when the date, or sorry, when they check out, or like after the last date. So that's something I'm going to look into adding in the future, try to flesh that out more. But this is a very sort of basic bare bones version. And then inserting into the reservations table, into specifically these columns, guest ID, room ID, etc., the values that we have input, and then just select star to display the information. And to illustrate how this works, saving a reservation, we're going to execute the stored procedure. Guest ID 1, we're going to say room 4, which is booked at the moment, so it should not, the data constraint should not allow me to book that. There we go. Message, here we go. Guest ID is valid, room ID is valid, room is already booked. And so if we refresh, yep, it was not added. The data constraint worked effectively. But just to show an example of it working correctly, we will go ahead and look at a room that is not booked. Room 3 is not booked. Let's go guest ID 2, room 3, check-in date. And let's see. There we go. So now, because of our select statement, we can see the new reservation, the guests, the room ID, number of guests, number of days, and all these will be calculated afterwards. All right, thanks for taking the time to watch this video.